So, thank you everybody for joining. I have been asked, and I am so honored to be the first presenter for this amazing new user group. Um, I have been tasked, I wouldn't even say it's a pressure of any kind, but to try to set the stage for future similar events and just the kind of presentation that you may find in this group. But I'd like to talk about my journey coming from birth to where I am now. And hopefully, it won't take a full day to tell you guys. But um, as I mentioned earlier to the earlier group who joined us, I like to run this presentation in a very casual way. So if you have a question as I'm moving along, please interrupt me. I encourage you to, and I'll try to address it if it makes sense. Otherwise, if you leave it, you can also leave things to the end. I appreciate that as well. I've made a space for that. But don't hesitate if you want to interrupt. So I titled my presentation Uniquely Typical because I know it's a contradictory phrase, but I feel that a lot of the things that I've come across in life is quite typical for people who are marginalized, be it your race, your gender, your neurodivergence, the way you live your life. That happens, and you can relate. But I feel like every one of us address these types of adversities uniquely, and I wanted to share my unique perspective, and hopefully that would start a conversation. And if you have questions, I love to entertain them. So I like to call those things in life that kind of gives a sour taste or really like bitter taste, little lemons in life. And I'm sure you guys have a million, and I also have a million, but I've bubbled up a few here to speak to, primarily because I feel like these particular lemons have helped shape the person that I am today. Each and every one of them helped to create the personality, the mental approach, the perspective that I have today. So I'd like to share that. So my very first one, and I'm sure all of you guys have had that, is you get gifts and you're kind of like, okay, thank you. It's not something that you asked for, but it's something that is gifted to you. So you should appreciate it. So that happened to me when I was very young. My fourth birthday, my aunt who lived in America studied there, and I'm born in Malaysia. So for those of you who are not familiar, it's a peninsula in Southeast Asia, and it's just a really fun, cozy place. I just remember associating that with lots of really good food. But I was there just enjoying life, and my aunt comes along and it's like, "Hey, look, this is the latest and greatest craze for all the young girls in America. It's like a toy makeup kit. Here you go." And I think in her mind, she's thinking she's just gonna go make a mess of her face. She's gonna have so much fun. But instead, I looked at it and I didn't care for the color. I didn't care for the makeup. I didn't even know how to use makeup. And I just kind of pulled it apart and I started to figure out how I really was intrigued by the lipstick, how you can twist it and make it move. And I was like, what is this magic that I'm seeing? So I remember taking it apart and just completely destroying all of the things in that bag. And yeah, I very quickly learned that that was not a good thing, but because I didn't know how to put it all together, but I figured out it was just something that really turned on a switch inside of me. And I did start to fix almost everything in my path. I tried to fix my mom's watch when it started to not work. I tried to make little uh, I found like trash disposable spoons on the ground. I would like tie a stick to it and rubber band it together. And then it was like a rescue stick. I was rescuing tadpoles from one pond to another as it was drying up. Like I was doing nut stuff with things that I found. I found agave leaves in Malaysia. They have like these massive, scary ones with spikes on them. I would pluck them off, peel off all the little spikes, and find the biggest spike and use that as a pen and paper so you can like draw on it and give little messages to friends. So it became something that just clicked in my head. And you kind of get it if you see my kid pictures. So I'm one of three kids in my family, super tomboy. My sister was forced to get her haircut just because she's my sister, but she hated it. She's a girly girl, but I was like the yes, I don't have to brush my hair as much. So the following year, my aunt learned her lesson and she got me a video game instead of makeup. But that was kind of who I was growing up. And that helped me to learn that, you know, it's something that you shouldn't be ashamed of, even though everyone was like discouraged that I broke things, but it made my energy of discovery and like curiosity going. So it drove a lot of my decision on the paths that I took. I love being creative. I loved art, but my parents definitely was like, you can't make a living with art, so go into something more sustainable like engineering. So I did in my college years hop into that field. I was a mechanical engineer undergraduate, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And there I learned that I don't necessarily understand all languages. I'm pretty good at learning new languages, but I'm not talking about learning English from Chinese and Malay when I was in Malaysia. I'm talking about the language of math and science, which is something that I never knew was a thing. So in my undergraduate years, one of the toughest class I took was mechatronics. And not because it was a tough subject, but because it was a culmination of mechanics, computer science, electronics, electrical engineering. I cannot, to this day, differentiate between amps, watts, voltages. I cannot do it. I think my brain just like lost that part of the circuitry at birth. But I muscled through that class. And having the right kind of educator and mentor and guidance would have helped me so much. I could have been a great person to help teach this knowledge later. But one of the things I struggled with was that professor I had in that class. He, for whatever reason, was not able to communicate to me personally how something worked. He used examples like from a car parts, from things that were so foreign to me. I have never taken a car apart. I have no idea what the carburetor is. At the time, I didn't understand any of this, but all the examples he used came from automobiles. And when I was brave enough to raise my hand, enough courage to say, can you explain that in a different way? Is there another device that does a similar thing? He looked at me like I grew another head and just moved on. And I felt so left behind. And then when I looked around the room, I felt that I felt like I was the only one that didn't understand. Of course, I follow up with my friends later, and all of whom were men. That I was the only woman in that class. And I asked, did you understand what the professor was talking about? You know, when they talked about this thing, and at least all the friends that I had was just they shook their head. They're like, I have no clue what he was talking about. I'm like, but you nodded your head. What? They're like, well, you know, we have to get an A in the class. So it also made me wonder if we are brave enough to ask the right questions. And is it that we are building this history of learning things the way we're taught and teaching it the same way, but not ever really understanding how you speak the language of the people you're trying to communicate with? And I'm not talking about the phonetic language, but just logic language. So that kind of moved me into this. I carry that knowledge into my future in all the work that I did. I wanted to really empathize and understand if I'm trying to teach someone something or make something available to someone, how do I make sure that they understand? How do I know that I understand? So when we make our models, when we work on our projects at SolidWorks, I'm part of the user experience design team. Shout out to all of the cool UXers here. We are responsible for making things feel great when you use it. So it could be products, it could be software. In our case, we want to make SolidWorks extremely user-friendly. And as a veteran working on this stuff, it was definitely important for me to be able to taste my own dog food or taste our own champagne, like try out. So every project that we ever work on as UXers or PDs or a product definition team or anyone who works on projects is you can define something, can send it out, but afterwards we need to make sure that it works the way we want to. And traditionally, models, when we run examples through whatever feature we design, we're using sample products like I think we have a lot of like engine blocks and vehicles and like mechanical elements. But I thought, we have customers who design jewelry and toys. Why are we not testing those types of stuff? So as one of the things that I remember working on was I was testing out X design on a phone. I wanted to know if I could design a set of earrings. And sure enough, by doing so, I found a lot of mate issues and stuff like that that was very intricate, how to select not just edges, but like circular edges. Like, so it made me think about the problem differently because I decided to look at this differently and I thought about the people that I wanted to communicate with. Same thing with X shape. You could make some really nice curvy covers for an iron or a printer, but what if I want to create a toy octopus? And I really worked and saw how difficult it was to replicate a suction thing onto the next one. There's no propagation tools, that kind of stuff. So different ways of approaching stuff when you think about how you learn and you think about how you teach. And even though you're not a teacher by trade, you are a teacher. Being in a community of people who have lesser skills or more skills than you are, you have to communicate and share and educate. So those are things that I learned from. And that also carried that over to the generational gap. I was fortunate enough to work with a team of folks who were passionate about designing tools for the younger generation, apps for kids. And there we also talked a lot about, what would a kid do? Would they actually use a mouse? Would they just go right for the screen? And kids of this generation, do they care that much about dimensions, or are they primarily concerned about form and function? So there was a lot of that empathy discovery work that we did to really hone in on the product. But similar thought, carrying from that first experience of really not being able to understand the topic because my teacher couldn't do it well for me. So this is a few fun things that I created in apps for kids. And this is just a little shout out. If you haven't played with it, it's not for kids. It's not just for kids. I had so much fun modeling all sorts of stuff here, as you can see. Gremlins and Snoopy. I'm pausing for in case people want to interrupt. All right. This next one is probably the next two are like that part of our lives when we are just trying to find out who we are and have enough courage to use that voice. And maybe it's not the right voice. How do we hone it? And this was one of the most life-changing moments that I had. I was a teenager. I think I was maybe a junior in high school. I visited Malaysia. So at that point, I came to America when I was 9. And I went through the school system. And at this point in high school, I was fully integrated in the Western culture. Even though I spoke Chinese at home, ate Chinese food, all that stuff, my mind was very much in this westernized way of thinking. Going through school, we had all sorts of American high school things like learning about I don't know, like sports more important than anything, and math is annoying, that kind of mentality that we have. One of the things that we take for granted in America is that we have open discussions about sex education, or just preparedness for being self, what's the word? Like basically knowing that there are things out there to help protect you. As a girl or as a boy, and to make it so that it's understood that as a teenager, we're going to do what we're going to do. but you better do it properly and appropriately so that you don't ruin the rest of your life. So there's a lot of that education that is done in the US that isn't done all around the world. So when I went to visit my mom in Malaysia, she came up with this idea that I would speak to a school that she knows in the area. And she knew the superintendent. She's an educator in the Chinese school, but she knew of this other school. And they were looking for someone to speak to the girls, high school girls and middle school, and about taking care of themselves, making sure that they're well aware of their own bodies and what they should do and what's appropriate and what's not. So I was asked to speak at a Muslim girls' school. I don't know how many of you guys have been exposed or been had experience working with colleagues or friends who are in that religion and that kind of lifestyle. But for me, it wasn't too shocking because in Malaysia, a third of the population is Muslim, maybe more than that at this point, and Christian and other types of stuff. I grew up in a household that was like Chinese kitchen god. So it's not even, it's like Buddhist, a fragment of Buddhism. So I was familiar, but I kind of, I didn't read up on it. So when I went to present and they asked me to present that topic, I had previous meetings with the superintendent to go over the outline of what I would talk about and make sure that they're kosher with what I was going to speak about. They had me get ready before I go on stage in a library next to that space. And I remember being in that library, just kind of going through what I needed to talk about in my head, and I look up, and all along the rafters or the ceiling molding were phrases that was written down to, like if you ever are in the creative space, there's like little motivational quotes everywhere. It was very much like that. But I'm assuming that these phrases came from their teachings. And I remember that my first reaction was deep discouragement because there were phrases like, don't speak unless you're spoken to. It's very much as a Westerner at the time, I was very much biased and very closed-minded to and I got more and more discouraged. But as I sat there for a few more minutes, I really started to appreciate like what the deep-rooted meaning of all of those, that there's some history behind everything and there's a reason behind their teaching. So though I had a little ball of fire in me and I almost walked on stage with this like, well, I'll show them. I'm going to be, me. I did have to remember that I am a guest and this is not my place to make any kind of stance if I don't believe in any of the things that they said. And honestly, it was so hard for me. But as I spoke to these young ladies and I spoke to them on facts and what I learned and my perspective, near the end when Q&A started and I gave them time to ask questions, it was like silent. It was crickets. And I thought, oh my God, I've basically broken every one of them and they have no idea what to say. I get little hands popping up and they started asking questions about, how it was in America, what would happen if this happened, like situational questions, because they obviously have been exposed to media and wanted to understand, how girls go about solving problems like that. And it wasn't far before the conversation shifted over to boyfriends and significant others and like things that are like, I see this young boy during lunch and blah, blah, blah. So this is an all-girls school, but they neighbor an all-boys school. So there's some interactions between them, but it's all very respectful. In the culture, there's no touching. But it was very interesting that they opened up and I realized that there was still common thread. As long as I respected it, I did kind of step over bounds a few times. The superintendent and the teachers had to step up and be like, well, girls, your body is a temple. Do not, like they were like erasing most of the stuff that I was trying to say at a certain point because I think I went a little too Western talking about the topics. But it was a really important lesson I need to learn because to this day, when I am meeting some of our champions and other colleagues or customers who come from this culture, and they give a hearty handshake to all the men around me. And I reach out my hand, and they put their hand on their heart and just bow and say, sorry, I can't hold your hand. I have to remember that that's the culture, and it's not because they're treating me differently, but it is so hard. And so I just want to encourage you guys to be aware that different cultures bring along a lot of beliefs and story and reason. You have to respect it. And as much as I want to tell all of the people that I manage and mentor that you are a woman, lean in, take control. You earn your spot at the table and speak up. It is not as easy as that. And a lot of it could come from culture, could come from the things that they've grown up with. And the respect runs deep, filial piety. And if you're growing up in a culture where the bias in the gender is built into the system, overcoming it is not an easy thing. So I have to remember that every day. And I encourage you guys to understand that as you help elevate your colleagues and friends, that we don't all come from the same background. And it is a lot of brainwashing if that is the thing that needs to be done, but it's a lot of understanding. So on the theme of voice, I definitely have had my share of finding when my voice is not welcome.
If I could interrupt for a sec.
Yes, please, Joe.
Don't have to answer if you're not prepared for it, but so a lot of what you're talking about it fits. How did you become brave enough? Because that song, it's a good statement. I like how you phrase it, but at the time, it probably didn't sound like a good idea because I experienced that. So how did you become brave enough consistently?
I think it actually is part of this next one
Okay.
that I'm going to talk about.
That'd be fine.
But no, that's a really, really good question, Joe. It is definitely not an overnight kind of thing. And it absolutely helped to have a support structure. So when I took that one risk, or even when I didn't, I was not brave enough. Someone stood up and helped my voice to be heard. And I think that's the importance of surrounding yourself with the right kind of people, because you can't always be your own advocate. And if you are, as a woman, you may be projected as a little too aggressive. So having those advocates around you, no matter their gender or whatever, is probably one of the reasons why I've been able to build this voice. Every time I use that voice and I get reassurance and confirmation and I get a positive thing, it builds up that courage. And ultimately, once you hit the age that I'm at, or maybe later, you're like, I don't give an F. I'm just gonna say your filters start falling away. I think age definitely helps, but I would say my 17-year-old self, or even my 20-year-old self, I needed all of that. I needed the structure, I needed confirmation, I needed people to tell me that I didn't sound stupid. So community and support would be the one.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah?
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
That's good, because when you find yourself being brave enough and you speak up and you're discounted, it takes you back. You say to yourself, I'll never do that again, but then you build up the courage again. So it is important. I'll encourage others that if you're sitting at that table and that happens to someone, chime in. You may not understand, but acknowledge them. Don't allow someone else to squash them. And because you being silent, you're acknowledging it. It's okay. And
Yes.
and you're right. With age, I have no filter anymore. So I concur with that. Thanks.
Yeah, I swear I didn't plant Joe here to ask me that question, because that is a perfect comment to lead into this next one. So yes, you're absolutely right, Joe. So A perfect example of my life was this time when my voice was kind of silenced. This is maybe 1 or 2, I want to say 1.5 years into my professional life. I had just graduated. I joined Polaroid. For those of you who's too young to know what Polaroid is, it's a camera company. Um, and it's a instant camera company, quite well known. And they basically wanted to survive in a digital world at the time when I joined. Digital cameras had just come in. So they had this great effort and partnered with Olympus. One of the most, it was like Sony and Olympus. Olympus was like the camera. It's like Apple of cameras, right? Um, and so we partnered with them. They were creating the lens, the camera portion of the device. What you see on the right here is actually the thing we were trying to design. It's a on the go, it's like the size of a binder keeper, or oh God, that's also dating me. It's like a size of a, I don't know, like an iPad. And but it had in it a instant film printer, and you could take digital images with the digital camera, and when you are ready at a party or whatever, you can just take that same image and just spit out multiple copies instantly. And it was supposed to be like the thing. So I worked with Olympus remotely for a period of time. Had built up a relationship with a counterpart there. So it was time to go face to face because we had to start deciding on manufacturing and the tooling and all that stuff, and some of the residual issues that we were having with the rollers and the transition head, the scanning head. So I was sent there representing Polaroid. There were two of us, and the other one was more of like the logistics side, like the project manager side, and I was the mechanical engineer. And every day we would be in these boardrooms. And this is literally, this is not the photos of the boardroom, but this is exactly how it was and how it felt. When I walked in, it was just row of black suited Asian men, middle aged and older. And I was instantly transported back to my 10-year-old self. And I felt so incredibly silenced just by the nature of it all. But I was brave and I had a seat. I went up and I sat down, and I was representing the mechanical engineering side and next to my counterpart, Aizawa-san. And I remember we were having these conversations, and they were asking about the progress, where are we on track, what are the issues, and then so Aizawa-san would point out all of the issues that we're facing, and then they would be like, do you have solutions, are you working on anything? So I would chime up. I said, yes, we talked about it, and this is what we're going to try, this is the systematic test we're going to do, and these are the explorations. And I would say things, and they'll be like quiet, then they'll move on to the next topic. I wasn't sure if like they understood what I was saying, and if they agree, if they have questions, they would move on. But then I start realizing that they didn't hear me or acknowledge anything I said, because they'll ask a different variation of the question to wait for an answer that they want. And when I chime in again to try to politely explain, like, yeah, if we do this, it'll solve that problem that we were mentioning before, and this variation, again, as if I never spoke. And then Aizawa-san would, this would happen a few times, and Aizawa-san, my counterpart, would step in and just reiterate what I said. And then they'll look at him and say, okay, then do that. And I'm like, what just happened? Am I chopped liver? What is happening here? So this happened for maybe 3 or 4 days. And well, I was brought to tears in my private space. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And I was getting discouraged. I couldn't even focus on my work. So my boss, my manager at the time, called me up, and she, checked in on me, and I nearly broke down. I'm pretty sure I did break down. I was like, look, I don't think you sent the right person. I'm not doing this right. I'm here, and I thought I was doing the right thing, but no one's answering me. And every time Aizawa-san says something, they do it. But like, I don't think I'm the right person. I don't think they think I can do this. And she just let me vent. And when I completed, she said, listen, if I didn't think that you could do what we need you to do there, we wouldn't have sent you. And it's not a cheap flight. You're being there for a long time, and we know you can do this. So don't be discouraged. I will talk to the folks on the Olympus team to see what is happening. So I'm like, okay, well, thank you, thanks for believing in me, right? So I'm thinking she's just gonna call him, things are gonna be sorted out. So I felt better then. I felt a little bit more confident. She flew in the next day in person and sat in on one of the presentations, on one of the meetings, and witnessed exactly what I was talking about. And she went and spoke to the folks. And maybe it's because she's a Caucasian woman versus an Asian woman, but I don't know. Or maybe her title was much higher than mine. But whatever it was, she did magic. Because after that, Aizawa-san and I had our moments, and we could answer, and they acknowledged, and we moved on. And just that, a little bit of reassurance that we sent you there for a reason. You belong there. You've earned your right to be there. So wear it proudly. I was so thankful. To this day, she's still my sorry, great mentor. But anyway, I would recommend that you do that for other people if you can. But I didn't expect that.
It's okay. It's all good. You know what? I'll say a few words when you're saying that. Confirm that. Give you a chance to get yourself together. Um, Interesting that you say that. Did you find yourself? I'll speak about me, right? When I had a lot of my peers, if they were in a meeting with me with higher ups, they would come up and said, "You okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, why?" Said, "Your voice changed." So I found myself, in order to be brave enough, is that I had to change my tone of my voice. You have to be direct. You have to speak with authority. You have none, and that was weird, but I found that worked for me as well. So I'll pause it. Give it back to you.
Oh no, thanks, Joe. No, you're absolutely right. Thanks for giving me the break to catch up. um, yeah, I think it is weird because you people can hear that lack of confidence in your voice. They can hear that you're about to not have control over the thing you're about to say. Often it's like the little lilt in your words. When you present something, instead of definitively ending your statement, you lift your voice to kind of open up the opportunity for disagreement or whatever it is. I also learned that it is a lot of body language in the way you carry yourself. I was like a, first of all, being Chinese or maybe Asian in general or even Latina, I don't know, but like we look a lot younger than we our age. And the thing is, even though I was there, I was like 24. I can't remember now. I looked at some of the photos I had then. I looked like I was 12. So I can see how a little bit of my activity or a little bit of my voice, if I had the slightest bit of lack of confidence, it is clear to them to see that, hey, you're young, no idea what the hell you're talking about. I'm just gonna pretend you didn't say anything. So yeah, I feel like a lot of that is something that I needed to practice, but having that support structure there was really important. So yeah, the crack of voice, kind of like what you said, Joe. So crazy, but it's all part of the act. Yeah. So that was definitely one of those things that I learned, and with it, my lesson learned. Here's my little bit, and here's my plug for SolidWorks, reflected in the work that I've done for SolidWorks. I learned from that experience this need to just believe in myself. That I went to school, I got a pretty damn good GPA, and it's not just, I've earned my way into the field, and I have the right to challenge and push for something that I believe is right. And so I got to work on projects. Here on the left is the assembly visualization tool. I don't know if any of you guys have played with it. It was one of my biggest, proudest projects. I was presented with a brief that said, hey, we got engineers who would love to understand how their assembly come together with all sorts of properties. How should we help them see this? And we were brainstorming in the room. There's lots of like different charts, tables, like all ideas being presented. And I just said, well, you know, I just came from my master's. I didn't really say this, but I can't. So I'm a mechanical engineer. I went to undergraduate for that. But for my graduate school, I got a computer graphics design degree, an MFA, and it gave me a different perspective of art and digital art and the tools in it. And I told them, look, there's this really cool feature in some of the tools that I use where you can use the gradient tool or spectrum to define aspects of the product. And I said, look, we are shading our models anyway. Can we allow intelligence or parameter driven shading? So I talked about using this spectrum tool and how things can be adjusted. And I think I broke the developers and the product designers when I presented this. So I had to mock a lot of stuff up and present it. And thank goodness I had a great team who listened to me, gave me the opportunity to try this out. I think it turned out pretty well, but I had that opportunity and had that fortitude that I learned from the past to push forward, and it made me feel really good. Um, and I did similar things for e-drawings, and there's another thing called sustainability. E-drawings was this. I think a lot of you guys are familiar with it. It's been around for a while, and it needed a facelift. And I said, I have this vision. I want to move things around. There's animations. There's stuff that like pops in and out, and it's gonna be cool. And I also had the ability to program and code UI. So I took on the task of actually not only mocking this up, I coded the UI. And we happened to, at the time, use a platform that allowed us to take my coded UI and attach it to the code. And that's kind of how it's become. That's my giant fingerprint on that project. And for the sustainability project, I also pushed for a lot of graphical representation. I knew that people really, really needed to understand concepts that are so large in ways that are much easier to consume. There's an element here that I didn't grab the image of, which was how to understand how much water you're wasting, represented in units that make more sense than numbers. So we had graphical units built into it. So a lot of elements that came from my crazy brain that I earned enough courage to push it forward. So that was great. All right, we're coming near the end. Thank you for sticking with me for a while. I haven't read any comments. I'm so sorry, but I will when we get to the Q&A. So feel free to interrupt. So I'm going to talk about the last two. These are probably I would say the more mature group of these lemons, the ones that probably have been there for a long time, and only at my age or maybe later in your life can you reflect and realize, that's what it was. So this unspoken biases, there's so many out there. For me in particular, a colored woman in a tech world, that I have often just thought is just part of life, and just I've built filters to kind of overlook it or at least just dismiss it. But there was this one that I didn't even realize. It was just hiding in the dark. I had no idea it existed. And now with hindsight, yeah, I know. But I didn't discover it till I was having a conversation with my manager about my career path. So I've been an engineer or a UX designer and whatnot for a while. I've been with SolidWorks, I didn't say this, for 18 years now. But throughout that time, I've had multiple managers and things like that. And I remember having a conversation. And by the way, all the managers I've had at SolidWorks have been amazing. They've been just like godsend. I don't know. Like I just lucked out. I got the little like awesome straw when I picked it. But this, because my managers were great and supported me so well and allowed me to thrive in this space, I just didn't think that there was anything I should be worried about, that they're looking out for me as managers and they want me to succeed. So when we started talking about career paths, and actually for a few years, I was noticing that people that were hired with me at the same time or were more junior than me were getting promoted into positions, and they were all men. So I just thought, well, there were no other women. It's just like natural selection. I have no idea. And it wasn't until I started to question how long I've been in the role that I have, and I started kind of like having those conversations with colleagues, mentors, and whatnot. Like, what do I need to do to advance myself? And this is pretty far into my career. I probably should have questioned it sooner, and that's my advice for all of you guys. But when I presented that question, many things started happening. And ultimately, that conversation came back to my direct manager and I. And his reaction was, Chinloo, I had no idea that you wanted to take on a manager role. I just thought you loved doing your thing. I mean, being a mom and, you had responsibilities. I thought you just wanted to just, do your thing. So I didn't want to burden you with more stuff. And I'm thinking, those are all really nice words. But did he say the same thing to the guy, my colleague who was a guy? Um, so I really started to question if this was really one of those micro biases that were gender biased. And but I knew it was not malicious. So I did lean in and question and started talking. And I eventually got a manager role. But this is one of those lessons I had to learn, that just I cannot stop being vigilant. I can't take things for granted, because things will pass you by, opportunities will go, and you shouldn't accept the status quo of being unequal. And at the end of the day, still, as we know, women are still not equal in everything that we're treated. So I had to understand that. And by doing that, having a team, I then started to apply that kind of like questioning the status quo and like pushing the boundaries and asking why, why not? I got to work on projects. I got to choose. I got to push and say, I think this is an important project. I'm going to do it. I know we may not have resources and we need to thin this out. I'll take it on as an extra thing. Or, you know what? This other project may not need my attention as much. This other person will work on it. So having a team now with me and having the power to really decide what is important, I pushed and I questioned and I got to work on supporting mobile, touch, stylists. Those things were all marginalized topics that have eventually come to pass, and now it's important because those are the devices we live and breathe with. Head-mounted devices are the greatest. I got to work on projects like that. Got to work on AI projects when it was a fledgling thought, and maybe it was like a waste of time at the time, but got to work on it and prove that no, look how huge it is now. This was like, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, and it's so. Point is, I pushed the boundaries. I knew I couldn't take anything for granted. I can't assume that other people know how to steer the ship. I know how to steer my ship. So it was really a wake up call to say, grab onto the steering wheel, start driving, or grab onto the pen and start writing your own book. Don't let someone else write it for you. And with that, I come to my last point. No matter how hard you try, as a woman, as a man, whomever in the society you're in, if you are always feeling like you have to overcompensate, likely you will never feel like it's enough. And I think part of that is really understanding. So I love this quote from Albert Einstein. It says, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And you can interpret that however you like. But in my context, in this specific case, if I'm always trying to solve the same problem with the same way of thinking, I will continue to have to solve those problems over and over because they will keep coming up. I need to figure out how to look at them differently, how to solve them with a different perspective. There are many ways to do that. One way is tapping a different part of your brain. As someone who went to school for mechanical engineering and then went to computer graphics design, I mean, hindsight, clearly I needed to balance the two sides of my brain. And when you have that in you to tap into those parts of your brain, use it to solve problems differently. If something is constantly technical, look at it in a less technical way, more social, maybe, vice versa. So I would also say, include in that brainstorming, problem solving, a diverse set of voices. Have those meetings not always with the same group of people. You know, if you're trying to solve a problem and you always pull the same designers and programmers and engineers solving something that's functional, like people who work with that particular functional element, then you will never hear the voices of the QA or the tech support person who has to follow up on the problems that come from that product when it fails. Then you wouldn't understand that there's a problem if you design something perfectly to fit. What if the maintenance guy has to come and fix a problem? He can't get into that panel because you've built something in front of it. So there's all these perspectives that you will not see if you don't include those diverse voices. It works in a professional situation as well as your personal life. Like so often, Sal and I include our kids in a conversation to decide stuff and people around us because we as parents will always look at things as parents, but the kids have very different perspectives. So personal life also. And you know, if going to the professional side of things, there's so much resources out there for you guys to really run good brainstorming sessions. The one that I always lean back to is from IDEO. Like these are rules of brainstorming. This is how you keep cordial conversation, how you don't let a brainstorming session become a screaming match. So there are rules, easy to follow. You just set them in the beginning and have a confident and well facilitated session. Another great place if you're looking for ways to get some insight in running a good presentation. This is one I always promote. It's kind of an old book. I don't know if there's a new version out. I keep using this in all my slides, but it's a really fun book. It's like the size of a napkin. I think it comes with a napkin. It's kind of cute. But in it, there's this thing that I always carry with me, and it's beautiful. It's the way he categorizes, the author categorizes different people in the room as colored markers, like dry erase markers. There's a black pen, a yellow pen, and a red pen. And the way he describes that is that the black pen would be people, representing people that have all the creative ideas, very energetic, will be the first one to be at the whiteboard or blackboard and fill out and start drawing stuff and like listing all the important points. Those are the black pens. They may not necessarily care about whether or not they're on track, but there you have all ideas all day. You got the yellow pen, who are the people who maybe are not as have the initiative to jump up at the board and write things down. They may not be the ones that come up with ideas, but they're the ones that are very good at like seconding or supporting. Oh yeah, I love that idea. We should, they're the ones highlighting and encouraging, but they can maybe help hone the priorities because they're able to look at it slightly behind. Now you have the red pen. And for most, you might find those people annoying in the room because they say nothing. It is frustrating if you're just like, are you even listening? But oh boy, are they listening? These red pens are sitting there. They're your biggest skeptic, but they are judging and evaluating everything that's on the screen. They're the ones that are going to bring you back down to earth when you've created this fantastical thing. And they're like, well, what exactly was the problem that we were supposed to solve? Is this really solving that problem? They're the ones that will then give you the sharpest clarity on the solution. And they are just as valuable as the black pen. So all of these people have to exist in a group to have those great moments of conversation. And I would say that you may not be one pen all the time, depending on the condition and the group of people. You might find yourself falling into a different pen role, and that's great because then you're filling the gap. And embrace this. Don't be frustrated at those different personalities because they are all important in the conversation. And it will also help you to appreciate their voices as well as your own. I see some people identifying as red pens. And yes, Sal, you are definitely the red pen. All right. Lastly, speaking of Sal, I want to say that in the effort for me to understand how ideas are shared, how we communicate, how we hear each other's voices, how we elevate each other. A lot of that has come from working with Sal all these years. And only recently we were able to get the courage or idea to do this project called Our Next Make, which is a social media content creation site. It goes on Facebook, all the different places, YouTube, and we want to use our own software to show people how awesome it could be to make things in our lives and bring to life things that are in our head. But I think part of it is that working with him and working with our colleagues who make as well and other makers that we meet, I see all of those things I mentioned before embodied in all of them, and how they, in order to overcome it, have redirected a lot of that energy into making things because they're all creative people. So my point here is that, embrace all that. Embrace all of those nooks and crannies and crazy things that are you, and then let yourself shine. Do it in a way where you're proud of it. And in my situation, I'm proud of all of these things that come in my head, and I'm able to share it with my husband in doing this project. So yeah, if you're curious at what we do and you haven't checked this out, the bio site is on the left here. You can check it out, and then you can go to any of your favorite locations of social media socialing. Lastly, I want to say my life lessons, and these are pretty short. One of the things I mentioned before is find your people. Find the people who will understand you, support you, challenge you in a polite way, and help you find that voice that you should have. And also, we only have so many minutes and seconds on this earth, and being conscious and living and enjoying it. Live every day to its fullest, because you'll learn so much as you interact with it and the people around you. And also, the most important lesson that I still am learning and practicing is don't take yourself so seriously. Cut yourself some slack. Give yourself the freedom to fail gracefully. And when you do, just let it happen. I mean, for crying out loud, we are judged every day by so many people. Don't waste your living hours judging yourself. It is not worth the energy. And I want to just tuck this one in. These are kind of when I was asked by Nicole, Cara, Betty to think about kicking off this user group, I thought about what it meant to me and what it can mean to all of you. Because honestly, if we do it right, everyone, this is what I think could be. We're going to be able to empower others in the group, help them tell their story by telling your own. We're going to be able to elevate everyone by seeing how we can help each other be successful. And whether you're like-minded or whatnot, but it helps you to go through the daily grind. It's an opportunity to connect with some amazing people. And also, if you know of other amazing people that should come here and connect, please spread the word. And ultimately, it is just a great way to help you persist in this crazy world that we live in and to persevere. So having a group like this would definitely help us get there. And I'm going to end all of that to give you guys, I hope we have time for Q&A. But yeah, that's what I got to share. All right, I'm going to.
Oh my God. Amazing. Amazing.
Thanks,
Thank you so much. That I was on the edge of my seat for that entire presentation. Like, seriously, taking in every single thing you said. That was so spectacular. Thank you. I really needed that.
I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. Yeah, it was, Sal knows, I was stressing over this presentation because I'm like, how do I say all of this without sounding boring? And I'm glad it wasn't boring. Yay, thank you everyone for all the
I don't think that you even came in the realm of boring. Like, you couldn't have been further from it, in my opinion.
Thanks.
Even Sal couldn't do his work because he was so influenced by you.
That is so true. I'll have to concur. It wasn't boring. I could imagine the hardest part is trying to isolate what you're going to talk about in this meeting, because I can imagine there's so much. But awesome job, awesome
Thank you.
layout and presentation.
Thank you.
There's a lot there. There's a lot there.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I could probably do another presentation to some
You
more
can.
stuff.
You
But the
can.
thing is, but I think the thing is, every one of you, especially folks that haven't presented before, should feel perfectly confident that you can do a presentation if I just kind of did what I did.